Hello there. Welcome. You guys ready for more Project 2025? I don't think I am. Excuse me while I roll myself into my talk spot here. Oh boy. Hi, Puck. How you doing, you stinky knee? What's up, buddy? Hello. Hi. I don't know if you guys can see the dog. Hi, come here. Hello, buddy. Hi. Hello. You stinky. There you go. Hi, bud. Boop. You've been booped. Normally he'd be outside or would have spent some time outside, but it's raining and he's not a fan of that. He don't like it. Hi. Oh, you gonna bonk your head? You gonna bonk your head? Yes. What are you looking for? Love? Are you looking for love? Do you believe in a thing called love? Boop. Okay, thank you, buddy. I'm gonna go read this awful document now. Thank you. Goodbye. He's still kind of there. He hasn't made a decision yet. Gesundheit. Alright, let's get started. No rhino bath, only swim. Accurate. Very actually accurate. Unironic. Alright, let's get this. Make sure we're set up here a little bit better. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. My dumb face isn't very important about this. For this bit. I don't know if my, like, the visceral visual responses that my face gives to this document is worth its own weight. Okay, here we go. We're on chapter 11. Oh, that's right. This was long. I forgot. Chapter 11. The Department of Education by Lindsay M. Burke. This is gonna give me an aneurysm. I have a thing about the education systems, both in America and in Canada. Like, I have like a whole spiel about how they need to be completely remodeled and reworked to match our society's standards and what we need and where we should want to go as a society. But, you know, that's never gonna happen in my lifetime. But, you know, I mean, not that I'm doing anything to help, I guess. You know. So, let's get down to business. Time to fuck around with this shit. Alright. Mission. Federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately the Federal Department of Education should be eliminated. Oh, that's a good start. Did I say this last week when we were here? That's a strong beginning, I guess. You're gonna fall asleep to this? Oh, yeah, bless your heart. I hope it works. Yeah, this mug is super cute. I got it from my sister. It's got like a little swirly tree on it. Isn't it cool? I really like this mug. Alright. This is just a regular sized mug. I'm just small. It's only just like the size of my head. I mean, alright. When power is exercised, it should empower students, family, and families, not government. In our pluralistic society, families and students should be free to choose from a diverse set of school options and learning environments that best fit their needs. Sure. Our post-secondary institutions should also reflect such diversity, with room for not only traditional liberal arts colleges and research universities, but also faith-based institutions, career schools, military academies, and lifelong learning programs. I'm pretty sure all of those things exist, don't they? Elementary and secondary education policy should follow the path outlined by Milton Friedman in 1955. Yeah, we're not going to change anything about our education system in nearly 100 years. What are we at? What are we at? 2022? We got 30 more years before 1955. Was this 100 years ago? Wait, is that correct? Yeah, I think that's right? Wherein education is publicly funded, but education decisions are made by families. Ultimately, every parent should have the option to direct his or her child's care of education funding through an education savings account, an ESA, funded overwhelmingly by state and local taxpayers, which would empower parents to choose a set of education options that meet a child's unique needs. I mean, that sounds cool. That sounds like Sweden. Sorry, Sweden. That sounds like what Sweden does. You get a voucher, and then you can pick whatever school you want, and they enable you to get to that school and have dormitories and stuff, right? States are eager to lead in K-12 education. For decades, they have acted independently of the federal government to pioneer a variety of constructive reforms in school choice programs. For example, in 2011, Arizona's first piloted ESAs, which provided families roughly 90% of what the state would have spent on that child in public school to be used instead on education options such as private school tuition, online courses, and tutoring. In 2022, Arizona expanded the program to be available to all families. I mean, that sounds cool. Maybe. I'm not sure. In the future of education freedom and reform in the states is bright and will shine brighter when regulations and red tape from Washington are eliminated. Federal money is inevitably accompanied by rules and regulations that keep the influx of funds from having much, if any, impact on students' outcomes. It raises the cost of education without raising student achievement. And not everything is a business. To the extent that federal taxpayer dollars are used to fund education programs, those funds should be block granted to states without strings, eliminating the need for many federal and state bureaucrats. Eventually, policymaking and funding should take place at the state and local level closest to the affecting families. Although student loans and grants should ultimately be restored to the private sector, or at the very least the federal government should revisit its role as a grantor rather than a direct lender. Federal post-secondary education investments should bolster economic growth, and recipient institutions should nourish academic freedom and embrace intellectual diversity. Okay, but all right. But sure. But the issue with schools like college and university is that they're excessively expensive because of an insane amount of inflation, not because of whatever you're talking about. I'm not sure what you're talking about yet. That has not, however, been the track record of federal higher education policy or the many institutions of higher education that are hostile to free expression, open academic inquiry, and American exceptionalism. Imagine being hostile in an educated environment about American exceptionalism. Imagine going to a school, being told how, growing up in K-12, being told how amazing your country is. You walk into a college room, and the teacher isn't from America and says, yeah, America's not that special. Oh, the horror. Federal post-secondary should be more than massive, inefficient, and open-ended subsidies to traditional colleges and universities. It should be rebalanced to focus far more on bolstering the workforce skills of Americans who have no interest in pursuing a 4-year academic degree. It should reflect a fuller picture of learning after high school and placing apprenticeship programs of all types and careers and technical education on even playing field with degrees from colleges and universities. What? They're just not the same. You it not one isn't better than the other. They're just not the same. Rather than continuing to buttress a higher education establishment captured by woke diversocrats, and a de facto monopoly enforced by the Federal Accreditation Cartel. Guys, do you want lawyers to have to do the bar exam and be held to ethical standards of their field? Do you want doctors to be held to ethical standards in their field to have their degree? Or like, psychologists? Insert Jordan Peterson joke here. No? You don't want those things? That seems bizarre. Hello. Diversocrat. The monopoly enforced by the Federal Accreditation Cartel. Federal post-secondary education policy should prepare students for jobs in the dynamic economy, nurture institutional diversity, and expose schools to greater market forces. Overview. For most of our history, the federal government has played a minor role in education. Then, over a 14-month period beginning in 1964, Congress planted the seeds for what would become the U.S. Department of Education, or ED, or the Department. In July of that year, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964. After Congress... 1964 planted the seeds for the Department of Education. The Civil Rights Act of 1964. Is this a dog whistle that civil rights for black people and women ruined education? Is that what this is? Congress reached a consensus. Admittedly, I'm not always the best at recognizing dog whistles. Like, I try, but I'm not being the affected person, usually. Sometimes I don't pick up on them. I think that might be a dog whistle. Because, like, I try to take things on good faith, I guess, most of the time. But, like, even that one was loud enough to, I think, pop my eardrum. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, after Congress reached a consensus that the mistreatment of black Americans was no longer tolerable and merited a federal response. In the case of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, ESEA, the Higher Education Act of 1965, HEA, Congress sought to improve educational outcomes for disadvantaged students by providing additional compensatory funding for low-income children and lower-income college students. Spending on ESEA and the HEA, part of Johnson's War on Poverty, grew exceptionally in the years that followed. By fiscal year 2022, ESEA programs received $27.7 billion in appropriations, an additional $190 billion that came through the pandemic's Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief ESSER funds, which relied on ESEA formulas. The same year, the department spent more than $2 billion just to administer Title IV of the HEA, which authorized federal student loans and Pell Grants. It provided $22.5 billion in Pell Grants and oversaw overlays of close to $100 billion in the indirect student loans. This all happened while Trump was in office, right? Like, I'm understanding this? Since 1965, Congress has continued to layer on dozens of new laws and programs as federal, quote, solutions to myriad education problems. In 1973, it passed the Rehabilitation Act, and in 1975, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. To address educational neglect of students with disabilities, in 2002, it created the Institute of Education Science to consolidate education data collection and fund research. Congress has also enacted a series of Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Educations Act, including Perkins 5, or V, I'm assuming it's 5, in 2018. Because I grew up in an age where I had to learn what Roman numerals were. Congress could have, and once did, distribute management of federal education programs outside of a single department. Period. But, take a drink. For those interested in expanding federal funding and influence in education, this unsolicited approach was less than ideal, because a single captive agency would allow them to promote their agenda more effectively across administrations. Eventually, the National Education Association made a deal and backed the right presidential candidate, Jimmy Carter, who successfully lobbied for and delivered a cabinet-level agency. Wasn't Jimmy Carter a Republican? Am I support Toad? Thank you for support Toad. I've been blessed this day. When it was established in 1979, becoming operational in 1980, the agency was supposed to act as a corralling mechanism. Carter signed the Department of Education Organization Act into law in 1979, believing in part that it would reduce administrative cost and improve efficiency by housing most of the federal education program that had proliferated in the wake of Johnson's War on Poverty under one roof. It has had the opposite effect. Citation needed. Instead, special interest groups like the National Education Association, or the NEA, American Federation of Teachers, AFT, and the Higher Education Lobby have leveraged the agency to continuously expand federal expenditures. A desirable funding that is not having the opposite effect. That is acting as intended. Being able to lobby is part of the system. If you don't want lobbying to exist anymore, then ban lobbying and maybe get rid of some of those Supreme Court justices who are taking bribes. Like, if you want to take lobbying out of government, good, great, go ahead. Cool. Elon Musk should be in jail then for breaking that law, because we're allowed to apply the law retroactively, right? That's what this document said. Right? It has a desirable funding stream from their vantage point, because federal budgets are not constrained like state and local budgets that must be balanced each year. By fiscal year 2022, the department's discretionary and mandatory appropriation topped $80 billion, not to include student loan outlays. Each of its programs has attendant federal strings and red tape. One recent example is the Biden administration's requirement that state education agencies and school districts submit equity plans as a condition of receiving COVID recovery ESSER funds in the American Rescue Plan, the ARP. This exercise led to hiring of numerous new government employees as the rules were promulgated. I hate dashes in words. It really messes me up way more than it should. This is basically saying let's defund schools on the federal level. Yes, this is saying defund school, not just schools on a federal level, but students who are students of universities or colleges, and remove the Department of Education on a whole. I would like to remind you that if I am not mistaken, the Department of Education is one of the bodies in charge of making sure the syllabus and the things that are being taught in school are actually legit. I know a lot of that is on the state level as well, but am I wrong that the federal, is that, I mean, it's different in Canada, so maybe I'm just wrong. It's what you're supposed to teach, not federally, doesn't have any federal say to it? The standard testing and stuff like that? Is that only statewide? I don't know. Is it like, can a school say we're teaching creationism in class because our state decided that, or is that a federal thing? Am I wrong about this? This exercise led to the hiring of numerous new government employees at the rules as the rules were promulgated. Plans were created after collecting public feedback, and those plans were eventually deemed satisfactory. The next administration will need a plan to redistribute the various congressional approved federal education programs across the government, eliminate those that are ineffective or duplicative, oh my god, duplicative, and then eliminate the unproductive red tape and rules by entrusting states and districts with flexible, formula-driven block grants. This chapter details that plan. As the next administration executes its work, it should be guided by a few core principles, including only private schools. So, okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Private schools are allowed to do whatever they want, but the federal government sets the basic standard. So if you remove that suddenly that basic standard that they're required to follow goes away. And if that goes away, you remove that restriction that says that, let's say, like a Bible Belt heavy school in a district inside of a Bible Belt heavy state is suddenly going to be fine with teaching creationism and only creationism, right? Which, I mean, I guess if you want to destroy the coalition that is the united part of the United States of America and just say every state is going to be its own country, then why do you have a government at all at that point? Why are you not just dismantling the government on a whole in a way that just turns all of the states into countries? Because, I mean, imagine that's because that's not going to work. Like, Texas would be screwed. If I'm not mistaken, Texas is constantly being given money by the united part of the United States and operates on a deficit where it receives money, and New York is at a net positive and is feeding into the system. But weird. It's almost like you have these aggressive bullies that want to take everything from everybody else and never give anything back, and then make everybody do whatever they want. Advancing education freedom. Empowering families to choose among a diverse set of education options is key to reform and improve outcomes. It can be achieved without establishing a new federal program. For example, probability of existing federal education spending to fund families directly, or allowing federal tax credits to encourage voluntary contributions to K-12 education savings accounts managed by charitable nonprofits could significantly advance education choice. What? You want to put this on just people doing it out of the goodness of their hearts? Oh god, damn. You're going to put the future of America, the education of your young children and the care of your young children on the good-heartedness of people who are already struggling to survive. Are you fucking stupid? Are you high? Providing education choice for federal children. Congress has a special responsibility to children who are connected to military families who live in the District of Columbia, who are members of sovereign tribes. Responsibility for serving these students should be housed in agencies that are already serving these families. Well, that's not a choice then, is it? Restoring state and local control over education funding. As Washington begins to downsize its intervention in education, existing funding should be sent to states as grants over which they have full control, enabling states to put federal funding towards any lawful education purpose under state law. Oh. I'd be amazed to see Texas turn blue this year. Treating taxpayers like investors in federal student aid. Taxpayers should expect their investments in higher education to generate economic productivity. When the federal government lends money to individuals for post-secondary education, taxpayers should expect those borrowers to repay. Oh, you mean like Boeing? Like the banks that all got bailed out? Like the airlines that got bailed out? What are they doing besides downsizing planes and making air travel more expensive and a worse experience? No? I don't know. Protecting the federal student loan portfolio from predatory politicians. The new administration must end the practice of acting like the federal student loan portfolio is a campaign fund to curry political support and votes. The new administration must end abuses in the loan forgiveness programs. Borrowers should be expected to repay their loans. Fuck student debt relief. Fuck you, in particular. Safeguarding civil rights. Enforcement of civil rights should be based on a proper understanding of those laws, rejecting gender ideology and critical race theory. Alright, raise your hand in the chat if you think that people who wrote this document understand what critical race theory is and how it correlates to safeguarding civil rights. I would like an essay in the comments, at least 3 paragraphs long, where it's just you saying not at all in a bunch of different ways for 3 paragraphs. Thank you very much. The problem with student debt isn't the debt part. It's the interest part that students are literally never able to pay it off because of predatory practices, right? So like you get a loan, you're paying the loan, you've been paying the loan, and the loan has gone up instead of down. That's the problem, which is, by the way, very anti-Bible, very anti-biblical rules. Just point that out. North Dakota is actually at risk of turning blue. Oh, do we see a blue wave? Is a blue wave coming? Oh boy. I was watching Jon Stewart last night. I got a kick out of that one. That was pretty funny. It's like an 18-minute one. Stopping executive outreach. Congress should set policy, not presidents, through pen and phone executive orders, and not agencies through regulation and guidance. What? Stopping executive overreach. Congress should set policy, not presidents. Wasn't the whole up until this point of this document about how they're trying to circumvent Congress and how everybody should just be working toward the president's goals? So why should, now you're saying that the president shouldn't do executive orders? Because they don't like that Biden did some loan forgiveness? Okay. Stopping executive outreach. Congress should set policy, not... You know what? You want to fix a lot of the student debt thing? Say that there's not allowed to be interest on it after a certain point. Like, just be like, listen, if you loan to students, you're only allowed to collect a percentage of total interest. After that, you're not allowed to collect anymore, and they're just allowed to pay it off. And then just make that number reasonable. So let's say it's like 25%, right? So if you get like a $10,000 loan or a $100,000 loan, you only the interest you can ever pay on that loan is 25, right? $25,000. No. So then you could pay off the rate at whatever rate you want, and the interest can never go beyond whatever 25% of the total amount was ever paid, was ever given out. That seems reasonable. No? Like $25,000 is like what, 2 years worth of work, if like of a full paycheck, like a full paycheck at $12 an hour, right? So like it still might take people like a good number of years to pay it off, but the interest isn't gonna, you know what I mean? Like, no, would that not solve part of the problem? So then people are still paying back their loans, because the issue isn't that people aren't paying back their loans. The issue is that people are paying back their loans, but the interest on those loans is so high that they can never pay it. Like the total amount goes up, and they've long since actually paid that loan off. They've long since given the amount of money back that they've actually paid, or that they actually received, right? So it's not that people want to hand out, they don't want to not pay off their loans. They have, in fact, paid off their loans. This is stupid. Anyway, national emergency declaration should expire absent express congressional authorization within 60 days after the date of declaration. I don't know what that has to do with education, but I'm assuming that has to do with, like, the COVID stuff, but sure. Bolstered by an ever-growing cabal of special interests that thrive off federal largesse, the infrastructure that supports America's costly federal intervention in education from early childhood through graduate school has entrenched itself, but, take a drink, unlike the public sector, bureaucracies, public employee unions, and higher education lobby, families and students do not need a Department of Education to learn, grow, and improve their lives. It is critical that the next administration tackle this entrenched infrastructure. Needed reforms. We're all a cabal. We're all okay, listen, welcome to the cabal, everybody. We're pro-education here. Needed reforms. Federal intervention in education has been... How is that gonna... Sorry, I'm thinking too much about this. I need to turn my brain off. Federal intervention in education has failed to promote student achievement. After trillions spent since 1965 on the collective programs now housed within the walls of the department, student academic outcomes remain stagnant? What? They're new students. What do you mean remain stagnant? On the... Yeah, Alicia's got a good point. The government should not be telling people what you do and do not need. You should be telling the government what you do and you do not need, and the government should be enabling that. The government is for the people, by the people, of the people. On the main National Assessment of Education Progress, NAEP, reading outcomes on the 2022 administration have remained unchanged over the past 30 years. Declines in math performance are even more concerning than students' lack of progress on reading outcomes. 4th and 8th grade math scores saw the largest decline since the assessments were first administered in 1990. Average 4th grade math scores declined 5 points, and average 8th grade math scores declined 8 points. Yeah, I don't know what the points are worth, though. That doesn't mean anything to me. What is 8 points? What is the difference between 5 points or 8 points? That means nothing. Also, what are these scores actually scoring? Is this, like, per state? Is this per district? Is this an overall, like, everybody? Because if you're just doing everybody, America's kind of fucking big. So if there are states that are struggling more than others, they're going to drag the average down. Assuming that it's an average. I know I could probably look all this up, but I'm not going to because our board is already really full, and also I think this document should be responsible for giving me that information. Just 1/3 of 8th graders nationally are proficient in reading and math. Just 27% of 8th graders were proficient in math in 2022, and just 31% of 8th graders scored proficient in reading in 2022. That was while Trump was president, and also during a pandemic. That feels like it's a little bit unfair, don't you think? Like, the students, like, from 2020 to 2022 had to spend 2 years of their schooling adjusting and implementing, trying to do things from a distance. I mean, I kind of hope some of the stuff we learned during remote schooling during the pandemic like holds and sticks. I'd like to see more of it implemented in a less frantic emergency type of situation where it's just added into the system as an option. But, like, I feel like this is a little bit unfair. The long-term trend assessment, shows academic stagnation since the 1970s, with particular stagnation in the reading scores of 13-year-old students since 1971. When the assessment was first administered, math scores, though mostly improved, are still lackluster. So there's been improvement or not much of a change, which isn't a decrease. Like they're acting like it's staying the same is a bad thing when you're getting more people, more debt, at like more students, less with and teachers with less accessibility, like less money, less school supplies. The fact that between 1970 and 2024 that number has remained the same is actually really fucking impressive, despite like the down curve in the way education has been treated by America overall. So the fact that that stayed the same isn't a negative. That's actually incredible. I don't know if maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but additionally, the department has created a shadow department of education operating in states across the country. Federal mandates, programs, and proclamations have spurred a hiring spree among state education agencies, with more than 48,000 employees currently on staff in agencies across the country. Those employees are more than 10 times the number of employees, 4,400, at the Federal Department of Education. Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty much everywhere. Why is that weird all of a sudden? You have less CEOs and chairs of a board than you do employees on the floor? Like, what? Cabal counter. Yeah, that would have been pretty funny. And their jobs largely entail reporting back to Washington. Research. So they're researchers. They're gathering data and sending it back to improve the numbers that you're complaining about? Research conducted by the Heritage Foundation. Take a drink for research by the Heritage Foundations. Jonathan Butcher finds that the federal government funds 41% of the salary costs of state education agencies. And that's a problem. Oh my god, it's a graph. Holy shit, a chart. A chart with no fucking labels. I'm assuming the bottom is time, and the top is where people scored, which makes sense, I guess. Right? So in 2019, it was average. There was a spike from 2011 to 2017-ish, right? Of improvement, a dip, improvement, a dip, and then a big drop in 2022, which makes perfect sense. I don't know what the problem is. Why are we picking on 8th graders? I mean, I get it. Nobody likes 8th graders because of their shitty attitude. But, like, I'm the top of the school. If you're the top of a 2-year school, you're the top of a school, you're top of an institutionalized holding pen, waiting to be the bottom rung of the next institutional ladder. Anybody knows that quote, I'm gonna applaud you. This is 4th and 8th grade reading. I think they talk about 4th and 8th grade is because this is when they do this is the year they decide to do the testing, right? So this is where they have the data from, I assume. But the drop is also only like what would that be? 268, 267. So it dropped from 267 to 264, and then down to 260. It never hit 270. So you're still within like this 10-point average. I don't get it. I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense to me. Wow, there's a really big dip in 2000s. Damn. Hey, wait, where am I? Let's see, hold on. What year was I in 2000? Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna get distracted. I gotta keep reading. I don't understand why, like, it makes sense that there's a dip. Yeah, who would have guessed that reading scores would have been affected by the pandemic? Yeah, I don't understand. Nation's report card, national average scores, grade 4. This bloat has persisted for decades, but it's improving otherwise. You said that it wasn't improving at all from the 1970s, but if you look in 2011, 13, and 15, all the way to these are all improvement years. All the way from 2005, there was a really big average climb all the way till 2017. So if it was going up point by point, why did you tell us it was going down? It's the same with the 4th grade reading in 2000 from 2000, I don't know, 2003, because this graph isn't very good. And like, let's call it 2003 all the way till 2017. It's going up. So what do they mean that it's been stagnant? It hasn't been stagnant. It's been improving. And then the pandemic hit, and there was a bad time. When was Facebook and Twitter popularized? I wonder if that's really this is a heritagefoundation.org. So it's their own fucking shit is telling them they're lying. What? Defunding the schools is going to improve the reading scores. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Obviously. This bloat has persisted for decades. In 1998, a commission led by Representative Pete Hoekstra released a critical report based on extensive fieldwork interviews and analysis of the Department of Education. The report, Education at a Crossroads, What Works and What's Wasted in Education Today, detailed the suffocating bureaucratic red tape Carter's agency has wrapped around the state. The commissions, they really do not like Carter. The commission estimated, like half the time they don't even call him like former president. They just call him Carter. But they're very keen on calling Trump President Trump. The commission estimated that states completed nearly 50 million hours of paperwork just to get their federal education spending, which, I mean, the states combined, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that number sounds really big, but you're talking about all of the states and all of their education districts and all of their schools having to file paperwork. So if every school has to file 20 minutes of paperwork and there's 500 schools, which is a generous number, if every school, and let's call it 60 schools per district, and let's call it 500 districts, and then you've got 52 states. Yeah, no, 50 million hours is not weird. That's silly. Just to get their federal education spending, which at the time they estimated resulted in 65 cents to 70 cents of each federal taxpayer dollar making its way into the classroom, based on whatever. The situation has only worsened since Hoekstra report. More recent evidence of Washington's bureaucratic paperwork burden can be found in the growing number of non-teaching staff in public schools across the country, which doubled relative to growth in student enrollment from 1992 to 2015. Well, I mean, you're not going to have to worry about that since nobody's having kids in a handful of years, right? The labyrinthian nature of federal education program, convoluted funding formulas, competitive grant. Oh, now the funding formulas are convoluted. Did they not say earlier that they wanted the states to rely on formulas? Now they're convoluted? Competitive grant application, reporting requirements, etc., has likely contributed to the considerable bureaucratic bloat in state and local school districts across the country and is one of the key areas of needed reform. Streamlining existing programs and funding so that dollars are sent to the states through straightforward per pupil allocations, or in the form of grants that states can put towards any lawful education purposes under state law would bring a needed easing of federal compliance burden. Not if you start adding private schools to the people getting funding. The federal government should confine its involvement in education policy so that of the statistics gathering agencies and disseminates information to the states to improve educational opportunities for all Americans. The next administration should work with Congress to pass a Department of Education Reorganization Act to reform, eliminate, or move the department's programs and offices to appropriate agencies. The following is an overview of what should happen with each of the offices to each of the program currently operated by the department. The decline closer to 2017, the year T-Dog took office. Booyah. Yeah, right? Go figure. Program and office prioritization within the department. Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, OESE. The OESE is comprised of 36 programs ranging from Title I, Part A of the Elementary School and Secondary Education Act and Impact Aid to Program for Native American Students and the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. I'm not gonna lie, with how racist this document is, I'm surprised they even use Native American. Reduce the number of programs managed by OESE and to transfer some remaining programs to other federal agencies. Transfer Title I Part A, which provides federal funding for lower income school districts, to the District of Health and Human Services, specifically the Administration for Children and Families. It should be administered as a no strings attached formula block grant. Restore revenue responsibilities for Title I funding to the states over a 10-year period. That's basically just redlining certain states out of education. They're basically like an education that has less money, like Texas, gets less, people who live there get less education than a place like New York. Right? Like, that you're just gonna, this is divisive policy over things that I think everybody kind of agrees with, whether you're Republican or Democrat. I think most people agree that kids should have access to education, right? Like, OESE also currently manages a federal impact aid program which provides funding to school districts to compensate for reduction in property tax revenue due to the presence of federal property such as that allocated to military or tribal lands. Eliminate impact aid not tied to students. Move student-driven impact aid programs to the Department of Defense Education Authority, or the DODEA, or the Department of Interior Bureau of Indian Education. So I knew it! And they weren't going to use Native American. What did I just say? Transfer all Indian education programs to the Bureau of Indian Education. Oh my god. The DC Opportunity and me and my suffering. The DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, which provides vouchers to low-income children living in the nation's capital, appropriate as DC is under the jurisdiction of Congress, should be expanded to a universal program, formula funded, and moved to the Department of Health and Human Services. All of the programs at OESE should be block granted or eliminated. Office of Career... So any disability programs should just not exist? Okay. Are they being racist about education? Yes, they are. Office of Career Technical and Adult Education. Transfer the Office of Career Technical and Adult Education's few programs to the Department of Labor, but move the tribally controlled post-secondary career and technical education program to the Bureau of Indian Education. Segregation. Education. This is educational segregation. They're using policies in funny... Hey, who was it that was trying to argue that there is no systemic racism in America? Somebody who was like, hey, point to me at the policies that say, like, certain people of a certain ethnic group aren't allowed to have things or shouldn't have things or are segregated out of things. If you're voting for Trump, it means segregation of many things, one of which is education, isn't a deal breaker for you. Which doesn't surprise me that people who support Trump are racist. I'm gonna go to bed. Going back to bed. Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, OSERS. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, OSERS, houses nearly 24 programs ranging from funding for individuals with disabilities, Education Act, IDEA, hey, that's what I mentioned, and the National Technical Institute for Deaf to Special Olympics funding, and the American Printing House for the Blind. Hey, didn't they say all other programs at OESE should be block granted or eliminated? So you're just gonna block grant these or eliminate them? You're gonna eliminate the Special Olympics? Are you fucking serious? The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. Most IDEA funding should be converted to a no-strings, not all of it, but most funding should be converted to a no-strings formula block granted targeted at students with disabilities and distributed directly to local education agencies by Health and Human Services Administrations for Community Living. Okay, so which ones need to be eliminated? Are you not going to tell us? You're not going to tell us which one of the Special Education and like the Individuals with Disability Education Act aren't going to get their funding? You're not going to tell us which people with disabilities aren't going to be funded? Most? Which ones are you going to eliminate? I feel like that's relevant information. No, you're not going to tell us that? Oh. Oh, really? I wonder why. Transfer the vocational rehabilitation grants for Native American students to the Bureau of Indian Education. Phase out earmarks for a variety of special institutions as originally envisioned. To the extent that OSER supports federal efforts to enforce our laws against discrimination of individuals with disabilities, those assets should be moved to the Department of Justice, the DOJ, along with the Office of Civil Rights, or the OCR. Oh, so you are legitimately going to just remove everything else? So the National Technical Institute for Deaf to Special Olympic and for the deaf and the Special Olympics funding and the Printing House for the Blind are all going to get removed? Because they said remove everything else, right? They said all other programs at OESE should be block granted or eliminated. Then they just said that most of IDEA, which is the Individuals of Disability Education, right, with no talk about the Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, or the National Institute for the Deaf, or the Special Olympics, or the American Printing House for the Blind. This document is legit just saying defund all of those and some of these. Are you fucking kidding me? Hey, by the way, has anybody else noticed that a lot of disabilities are only even disabilities because they're not normative? So, like, for some reason, we've made this terrible decision that houses have stairs. Like, why? Why do houses have stairs still? Like, why are stairs a thing? Why do not all houses have, like, lifts? I mean, emergency exits, yeah, absolutely. But, like, we don't have to have stairs everywhere. We could have, like, cool ramps and shit. And, like, fucking slide down poles, and we don't have that for some fucking reason. Realistically, there's no reason why any house should be built without wheelchair or disability accessible things, like the whole house. Like, why are we even considering building houses otherwise, is the question, right? It's simply because society as a whole is short-sighted, stupid, and selfish. And, like, there's no reason for it. Most disabilities should be a non-issue when it comes to, like, mobility in society. Because this is something we should have fixed ages ago. Like, no house should be built anymore with fucking stairs as they are, or without a ramp access, or without one of those little chairs that go zoomy up and down the stairs. Like, there's no reason not to have those built into every fucking house. Why are these not built in? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Like, just have it in, like, if you don't want to use it, you can put it in a little cubby, and then, like, just pull it out for your little It's not like everybody doesn't have, like, an older family member. Like, all public housing should absolutely be accessible. In fact, if it's not accessible, it should. Why is it getting funding? Like that. I don't get it. Why aren't all books printed in Braille? Why don't we all just learn Braille? By the way, do you have any idea how great that would have been as a kid, being able to stay up without a light on reading? I'm just saying, we are dumb. People are stupid. Society's full of idiots. Do you have any idea how insane it is to me that we all don't know sign language? Like, sign language is just useful. It's like, even if you're not deaf, sign language is so fucking useful. Everybody should be speaking it and using it all the time. You should be able to be like this to your fucking bartender at a loud ass fucking bar so you can order your drink without screaming at the top of your lungs. Like, you go to a concert and everybody's like, whoa, yeah, and you want to talk to your friend, you can just be like, hey. Like, everybody should know sign language. The fact that we don't is insane to me. I also understand that there are parts of, like, the deaf community that feel, like, exclusive to them. But that's, like, yeah. I will add a sign language channel to the Discord. I will do that. I was actually considering learning sign language so when I was reading stuff like this and when I was talking, I could just sign while I was speaking, so that way the whole channel would also be in sign language. I am not that smart, though. So from my understanding, Australian Sign Language is actually better than American Sign Language, because Australian Sign Language leans towards one-handed signing as opposed to two-handed signing. That's like, what is it, bullshit? Bullshit, I think. If I'm remembering correctly, it's... All I'm saying is that it is insane to me that everybody doesn't know sign language. I don't understand. Remember when I said at the beginning of this that I was going to struggle with this one particularly because I have so many opinions about the education system? Anyway, we're back to defunding people with disabilities. Office for Post-Secondary Education, OPE. The next administration should work with Congress to eliminate or move OPE programs to ETA at the Department of Labor. Funding to institutions should be block granted and narrowed to historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and tribally controlled colleges. Move programs deemed important to our national security interests to the Department of State. Institute of Education Sciences, IES. Move ED's statistical office, the National Commission for Education Statistics, of the NCES, to the Department of Commerce Census Bureau. If Congress believes the federal government can play a valuable research role, those research centers can be moved to the National Science Foundation. If Congress decides to maintain IES as an independent agency, it needs to address major governance and management issues that keep it from being a productive contributor to the knowledge base related to teaching and learning. Hello. Office of Federal Student Aid, FSA. The next administration should completely reverse the student loan federalization of 2010 and work with Congress to spin off FSA and its student loan obligations to a new government corporation with professional governance and management, with a statutory charge that it preserve the federal student loan portfolio for the benefit of the taxpayer and students. This new entity would be one professionally governed by an agency head and board of trustees appointed by the president. What? There's no what? Why does it just stop and then go to back to the trends in 4th and 8th grade? Why are huh? Did the document just like I think this might be an error. That this wasn't supposed to be here. What? The long-term trends for 9 and 13-year-olds? Again, it shows an improvement over time, not a stagnation over time. This shows improvement and then a dip. Like, that's 2020. That's not even bad. That's actually, I'm impressed. They described this as if it was some kind of massive detriment. It, like, oh my god, it dropped 5 points. That's what I said when I said I don't know what 5 points means. This looks fine. Okay. President with the advice. What is happening? I don't understand. Why were these charts just randomly inserted into the middle of a paragraph, but also like two of them were charts we had already looked at? I'm gonna vomit. This is insanity. With advice. Oh, my fucking head. Oh, my brothers and sisters in Christ. Please. You can't be this dense. You can't. It's not allowed. It's illegal. The president, with advice from and consent from the Senate, funded with annual appropriations from Congress and operated by professional managers. Oh, professionals again. We're back to wanting experts. Federal loans would be assigned directly to the Treasury Department, which would manage collections and defaults. The new Federal Student Loan Authority would manage the loan portfolio, handle borrower relations, administer loan applications and disbursements, monitor institutional participation and accountability issues, and issue regulations. Office for Civil Rights, OCR. OCR should move to the Department of Justice. The federal government has an essential responsibility to enforce civil rights protections, but Washington should do so through the Department of Justice and federal courts. The OCR and DOJ should be able to enforce only through litigation. Okay. You know what? Fuck off. Additional bureaus and offices. For those attorney, accountants, experts, and specialists in the department's remaining offices subject to closure, whose positions might nevertheless be a key component of serving the mission, positions that might include the Office of Secretary/Deputy Secretary, Office of the Undersecretary, Office of the General Counsel, Office of Inspector General, Office of Finance and Operations, Office of Chief Information Office, Office of Communications and Outreach, and Office of Legislation and Congressional Affairs, The opportunity to join other agencies based on their expertise and the need for other agencies should be made available. For example, OGC higher education lawyers would join the newly independent Federal Student Aid Office or the Department of Labor. The OCG civil rights attorneys would join DOJ. These positions must be determined to serve as continued mission a continued mission need prior to being transferred. So they're not talking about actually making the government smaller. They're actually talking about adding more bureaucracy and bogging down other areas of the government. My sibling in crust. I know, right? Attorneys, accountants, experts, and specialists in the department's remaining office subject to closure and whose positions are... You're just repeating yourself. Stop padding your word count. Positions are indispensable to serve the mission, should have the opportunity to join other agencies. You literally said that. This is so repetitive. You get it. Who wrote this? What was your name? I already forget. You are the low dot. You're the one dragging everybody else's average in reading and writing comprehension. You fuck face. One of these days, I'm wondering if I'm going to end up being on a list, on a no-fly list somewhere where I'm not allowed to go to America anymore. Because I said everybody should be able to learn sign language. It should be a requirement. You should be fluent. Everybody should be fluent in sign language. Current laws relating to the Department of Education that require repeal. In order to fully wind down the Department of Education, Congress must pass and the President must sign into law the Department of Education Reorganization Act or Liquidating Authority Act. If you're not reorganizing it, you're just eliminating it. To direct the executive branch on how to dissolve the agency and as a standalone cabinet-level department. Congress should pass the next president should sign the Department of Education. It literally is just the thing they said. Current regulations promulgated by or relevant to the agency that should be rolled back or eliminated. While the next administration works to distribute department programs across the federal government, it will need to thoroughly review the many education-related regulations promulgated by the Biden administration. There are 5 primary regulation targets as of December of 2022. Hey, how come you're not showing us the 2023 education information? When was this written? I don't know. Maybe they didn't have it yet. But maybe they shouldn't be making decisions based on incomplete data or unreasonably incomplete data. Taking 1d20, 25 psychic damage. There are 5 primary regulatory targets as of December 2022 that require the next administration's attention. Regulations on 1. Charter school grant program priorities. 2. Civil rights data collection. 3. Student assistance general provisions, Federal Perkins Loan Program, and William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program final regulations. 4. Non-discrimination on the basis of sex education programs or activities related to federal financial assistance Title IX. And 5. Assistance to state for the education of children with disabilities, preschool grants for children with disabilities, equity in IDEA. The next administration should also review regulatory changes to the school meals program under the Department of Agriculture and changes to the income-driven student loan program. Additional Biden administration regulations on 1. Gainful employment, administration capability, and financial responsibility for institutions that participate in the the federal student loans and grant programs. 2. Title VI. 3. Accreditation in post-secondary institutions. And 4. Female athletics are expected to be released in 2023. Thoroughly review and the many education-related regulations promulgated by the Biden administration, as well as the school meals programs and income-driven student loan program. Again, we're back to their demanding of full review of things when they get there. Who's doing the review? Charter school grant programs. Congress first author. I hope it's ChatGPT. I hope it's an AI bot. I hope they just feed all the information into a machine learning program and are like, how do we fix education, question mark. And the bot's just like, feed me paper. Please write your question on a number 2 pencil. Charter school grant programs. Congress first authorized the charter school program CSP in 1994, Title 10, Part C of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, ESEA, as amended 20 U.S.C. paragraph 8061 or 8016 in 1994. It most recently reauthorized the program in 2015 as part of the Every Student Succeeds Act. On March 14th, 2022, the department published a notice concerning proposed priorities, requirements, definitions, and grant selection criteria related to the award of federal grants to applications in CSP. This proposal increases the federal footprint in charter school sector by ignoring statute and adding to the list of requirements imposed on charter schools. Listen, if you want to make a really big change to education on a whole by just changing one thing, education should be changed from a age-based system to an abilities age system. So you still use the same scoring and point system that you have in place, but you apply it per subject to be able to advance in that subject once you reach a certain threshold, regardless of how old you are. So if you're at a grade 5 reading level, right, you stay at a grade 5 reading level just because it takes you a little bit longer to learn it, instead of being pushed through to a more advanced thing where you start getting lost because you're so good at math. Right? So you can still advance in math, but you stay at the same level until you hit a certain grade in your reading comprehension. Right? You see what I'm saying? There would be hiccups in, can you understand this equation if you don't have this level of reading skill? Sure. But that's where you say, well, you can't advance any further here until you finish advancing here, and then your focus goes over here. So it lets students who excel at certain areas to excel at those areas. You still don't graduate until you hit a minimum thing in all subjects, but it lets a student go way more advanced in a subject at the rate that is appropriate for them to advance in. So if I'm really good at reading comprehension, but my math sucks, I'm not being held back by my math as much as I am by my age. Right? I can be at an 8th grade reading level in grade 6, but I'm still in grade 6 and have to do all the grade 6 stuff, even though it's very obvious that I'm an 8th grade reading level. Why am I not just doing 8th grade reading stuff and allowing myself to continue to advance further at a faster rate and be better at it? Right? You see what I'm saying? That would greatly, greatly change the way the education system affects students. For the positive, I think. Anyway. Yeah, I'll have to swing by. That would be cool. The new administration must take immediate steps to rescind the new requirements and lessen the federal restrictions on charter schools. Civil rights data collection. On December 13th, 2021, OCR published a notice concerning proposed revisions to OCR's mandatory civil rights data collection, or CRDC, which is proposed to create and collect data on new non-binary sex category, in addition to the current male or female sex categories, to retire data collection that indicates the number of 1 high school level interscholastic athletic sports in which only male and female students participate, 2 high school level athletic teams in which only male or female students participate, and 3 participants on high school level interscholastic athletic sports teams in which only male and female students participate. I'm sorry, did you just say the same thing 3 times in a row? Interscholastic athletic sports in which only male and female students participate. Athletic teams, okay. These poorly conceived changes are contrary to law, fail to take into account a student privacy interests, and statutory protections favoring parental rights under the Protection of Pupils' Rights Amendment, and jettison long-standing data collections that assist in enforcement of Title IX. That doesn't make any sense. The new administration must quickly move to rescind these changes, which add the new non-binary sex category to OCR's data collection, and issue a new CRDC that will collect data directly relevant to OCR's statutory enforcement authority. That doesn't make any sense. Let's just pretend the data doesn't exist, because that will give us more accurate data. Question mark. No, that's not how it works. Shouldn't it say male or female athletes, not and? This one says only male or female. This one says male and female. Oh no! Hey, get this gender language out of my fucking document. Hypocrites. Student Assistance General Provisions Federal Perkins Loan Program and William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program Final Regulations. Effective July 1st, 2023, the department promulgated final regulations addressing the loan forgiveness under the HEA's provision for Borrower Defense to Repayment BDR, Closed School Loan Discharge CSLD, and Public Service Loan Forgiveness PSLF. The regulations also included prohibitions against pre-dispute arbitrations agreements and class action waivers for students enrolling in institutions participating in Title IV student loan programs. Acting outside of statutory authority, and current administration has drastically expanded BDR, CSLD, and PSLF loan forgiveness without clear congressional authorization at a tremendous cost to the taxpayers, which estimated range from $85.1 to $120 billion. That's actually not very much. The new student administration quickly commenced Wait. So they're trying to say that taxpayers, which include the students, lost money because of this loan forgiveness, which allows them to keep money? The loan forgiveness lets them have more money. The new administration must quickly commence negotiated rulemaking and propose that the department rescind these regulations. The next administration should also rescind Dear Colleague Letter DCL Gen 22-11 and DCL Gen 22-10 and its letters to accreditation agencies dated July 19th, 2022, which are attempts to undercut Florida's SB 7044, providing universities more flexibility on accreditation, which they haven't talked about up to this point. This is the first thing in a point that isn't just repeating something they've said. Where is this coming from? What the fuck is this about? Why is this just thrown in here at random? Non-discrimination on the basis of sex education programs or activities receiving federal finance in assistance, Title IX. With its notice of proposed rulemaking published on July 12, 2022, the Biden Education Department seeks to gut sorry, I was thinking about the date. Seeks to gut the hard-earned rights of women with its changes to the department's regulations implementing Title IX, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex education programs and activities. What? What the fuck does that have to do with the hard-earned rights of women? Half of this document was already throwing women under the bus. What do you mean? Instead, the Biden administration has sought to trample women's and girls' athletic opportunities. Oh, okay. and due process on campus threaten free speech and religious liberty, and erode parental rights in elementary and secondary education regarding sensitive issues of sex, the new administration should take the following steps. I have a question. Where do parental rights even come from when it comes to education? Like, what's the basis for that assumption? I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm curious to know what the justification is for that assumed right that parents seem to have over the education system. I feel like maybe children don't belong, they're not objects, that they're not property that belong to a parent. And so the child's rights should be independent of the parent, which means their right to education is its own, regardless of the belief system of their parents. I think it's because schools are funded by local taxes. But we're not talking about local taxes right now. We're talking about the federal taxes that go out. Also, having schools done locally, district like that, is fucked, by the way. That's really dumb and really just keeps poor people poor and rich people rich. Anyway, what was I saying? Work with Congress to use the earliest available legislative vehicle to prohibit the department from using any appropriations or from otherwise enforcing any final regulations under Title IX promulgated by the department during the prior administration. Commence a new agency rulemaking process to rescind the current administration's Title IX regulations, to restore Title IX regulations promulgated by the then Secretary Betsy DeVos on May 19th, 2020, to define sex under Title IX means only biological sex recognized at birth. Okay, but that's way more complicated than I think you think it is. People feel entitled. Hey, parents. Very entitled. Work with Congress to amend the Title IX to include due process requirements, define sex under Title IX to mean only biological sex recognized at birth, and strengthen protections for faith-based educational institution programs and activities. They want to institute a theocracy, like I said last week. The Trump administration's 2022 Title IX regulation protected the foundational rights due process for those who are accused of sexual misconduct. The Biden administration proposed change to the interpretation of Title IX disposes of these rights. How? The next administration should move quickly to restore the rights of women, girls, and restore due process protections for accused individuals. Citation needed. Hold on, I'll get the citation needed out. Boop. Boop. At the same time, there is no scientific or legal basis for redefining sex to sexual orientation and gender identity. In Title IX, such a change misrepresents the U.S. Supreme Court's opinion in Bostock, threatens the American system of federalism, removes important due process protections for students in higher education, and puts girls and women in danger of physical harm. Do not talk to me about the problems in education, particularly faith-based post-secondary educational schools, and the threat and the danger that women and girls are put in those places. Do we need to talk about Liberty University again? Because I'll do that if we have to. I'd rather not. But if you want to know about Liberty University, I did a video about it. You should go check it out. Did a whole stream. Giant rabbit hole. Horrible. The number of, times that somebody, a woman is assaulted on campus and they are punished for talking about that and saying that happened is insane. That rapist Olympic swimmer, hello? The fuck? Don't, shut the fuck up. Facilitating social gender transition without parental consent increases the likelihood that children will seek hormone treatments such as puberty blockers, which are experimental medical interventions. They're not. They're not experimental. What are you talking about? Hormone treatments have been used for a very long time. We're back to, if you restrict the use of any hormone treatments to everybody, it means a lot of men and women and boys and girls who are not transitioning at all are not going to get the medical care they need. So stop unnecessarily restricting life-saving medications and treatments just because you don't like that some trans people are around who are doing nothing to you. There will always be more cis assaulters than there will be trans assaulters, period. End of sentence. And the reason for that is the statistical numbers. There are so many more cis people. So even if the percentages are the same, where let's call it 25% of trans people are going to sexually assault somebody, and say 25% of cis people are going to sexually assault somebody, do you have any idea the disparagement in that actual number that 25% represents? It's literally fucking insane. One day we will all transcend beyond gender at all. Language will evolve. One day in the future, if this video still exists and you're living in the future where you're looking at this for some kind of history thing that you've stumbled across, and we've got fucking people arguing about genders, and you're like, what's gendered language? That's fucking dumb. Why would anybody use that? I don't know. Take me with you. Help me. Oh, fuck, dude. Facilitating social gender transition without blah 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 blah. Research has not demonstrated positive effects and long-term outcomes of these treatments. Yes, it has. And the unintended side effects are still not fully understood. Yes, they are. That's just wrong. That's just a lie. The next administration should abandon these changes, change redefining sex to mean sexual orientation and gender identity in Title IX immediately across all departments. On its first day in office, the next administration should signal its intent to enter the rulemaking process to restore the Trump administration's Title IX regulation. In additional instances that sex is properly understood as fixed biological fact. People on Twitter right now are arguing about pelvic structure in bones, about whether or not a baby's head fits through a pelvis. And the answer is it literally can be anything. There's just generalized more or less. Official notice and comment should be posted immediately. At the same time, the political appointees of the Office for Civil Rights should begin a full review of all Title IX investigations that were conducted on the understanding that sex referred to gender identity and or sexual orientation. All ongoing investigations should be dropped, and all school districts affected should be given notice that they are free to drop any policy changes pursuant of the pressure from the Biden administration. So, you know, the ones that protect trans kids from being attacked from by their parents, by their bigot parents. Yeah, let's get rid of those protections for those children that these pro-life people care so much about. The OCR Assistant Secretary should prepare a report for OCR's actions for the new Secretary of Education, who should, by speech or letter, publicize the nature of the overreach engaged by his predecessor. The Secretary should make it clear that FERPA allows parents full access to their children's educational records, so any practice of paperwork obfuscation on this front violates federal law. Title VI, School Discipline and Disparate Impact. There we go. Assuring a safe and orderly school environment should be primarily considered for school leaders and district administrators. Unfortunately, federal overreach has pushed many school leaders to prioritize the pursuit of racial parity in school discipline indicators, such as detention, suspensions, and expulsions, over student safety. In 2014, the Obama administration issued a Dear Colleague letter that muddied the standard for civil rights enforcement under Title VI for student discipline cases. Before DCL, a school would be in violation of federal law for treating black and white students differently for the same offense. Disapparent treatment. Under the Obama administration, schools were at risk of losing federal funding if they treated a black and white student equally but had aggregated differences in the rates of school disciplinary by race. Disapparent impact. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but punishing somebody more based on their skin color is racist and disproportionately. If a group is being disproportionately fucking affected by a school disciplinary action, then it's targeted. Duh. OCR leveraged federal civil rights investigations as policy enforcement tools. These investigations could only end when school districts agreed to adopt lenient discipline policies, commonly known as restorative justice. Yeah, why would we want restorative justice when we could just beat people into submission, especially if they're not white? This is so fucking goddamn stupid and racist. We're back to them dog whistles again. Not that I think we ever left. Academic studies, as well as students and teachers' surveys, suggest that academics and school climate have been harmed substantially by this push. The Trump administration rescinded the Obama administration's guidance on school discipline and corrected the Obama administration's overreach in Title VI enforcement. The next administration should continue the policy of the Trump administration in this area and direct the department to conduct a comprehensive review of all Title VI cases to ascertain to what extent those cases include allegations of disapparent impact. Disapparate. Whatever. OCR should also review all resolution agreements with school districts to conform with this policy. As part of this effort, a new administration should also direct the Department of DOJ jointly to issue enforcement guidance stating that the Department of Justice? Guidance stating that agencies will no longer investigate Title VI cases that exclusively rest on allegations of oh my god, I'm stuck. Disapparent. No, there's no end. Disapparate impact. There we go. To the extent that the Biden administration publishes guidance or promulgates a regulation on this topic, the next administration should rescind the guidance and commerce rule making to rescind the regulation. Getting the federal government out of business dictating schools' discipline policy is a good start. Period. But take a drink. If the next conservative Department of Education simply rescinds the Biden-era regulation, it could very easily be reinforced again on day one through a Dear Colleague letter by another leftist administration. In addition to rescinding the policy, any related guidance, the next secretary should work with the next attorney general on a regulation that would clarify current regulations to the state of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act does not include a disparate impact standard. As law professor Gail Harriet noted, the alleged existence of disparate impact under Title VI makes everything presumed illegal unless given special dispensation by the federal government. Although it would require political capital from the White House, given that mainstream news outlets are sure to frame it as an attack on civil rights, because it is, the next conservative administration should take sweeping action to ensure that the purpose of the Civil Rights Act is not inverted through a disparate impact standard to provide a pretext for theoretically endless federal meddling. Who's gonna do all this review? Disparate. Thank you. Assistance to states for education of children with disabilities, preschool grants for children with disabilities, equity, and IDEA. Effective January 18th, 2017, the department issued final regulations under Part B of IDEA that require states to consider race and ethnicity in the identification, placement, and discipline of students with disabilities. The new administration should rescind this regulation. Students should never be denied access to special education services because of their race or ethnicity. But this is happening in school districts across the country thanks to the Obama administration's equity in IDEA regulation. This was not the intent of the regulation, but it is an inevitable byproduct of its flawed assumptions. Citation needed. The Obama administration looked at the racial statistics on special education assignments and made two assumptions: that African American students were disproportionately overrepresented, and that overrepresentation constituted a harm that required federal pressure to ameliorate. Ameliorate? Anyway. What? So now they're mad that disproportionately affected bonuses towards minorities is a bad thing? It takes a village to read this. Yeah. School districts deemed to overrepresent minority students in special education assignment or in discipline among special education students are tagged by their state education agencies as engaging in, quote, significant disproportionality. Why is that a bad thing if they're doing that? And all require to reallocate 15% of their IDEA Part B money to coordinate early intervening services that are intended to address the root cause of disproportionality. And that's a problem? In practice, it can mean raiding special education funding to pay for CRT-inspired equity. What? That's not what CRT... Oh my god. This is just buzzword central at this point. Consultants and professional development. This is especially problematic given that both of the assumptions behind equity and IDEA are flawed. Special education services provide extra assistance to students. They do not harm them. Period. And, take a drink. According to the most rigorous research on the subject conducted by Penn State's Paul Morgan, black students are actually underrepresented in special education once adequate statistical controls are made. That means that the regulation effectively further depresses the provision of valuable services to an already underserved group. Okay, but oh my god, the problem with statistical analysis is that, yes, you can make statistics say different things based on adding controls or removing controls. You can also interpret statistics differently. If you're looking at the entire country and saying this is disproportionate, and then you look at a predominantly white area where there is no disparagement in that because of like who lives in that area, you can make the assessments, which is why IDEA Part B was set up and coordinated in a way that allows an individual school or district to help rectify the issue without taking their money away, without like punishing them in any capacity, and is simply enabling them to put in preventative measures to make sure things have more equity going into the future. Like that, I don't understand what the problem is. The next administration should immediately commence rulemaking to rescind the equity in IDEA regulation. No replacement regulation is required. So this is just we don't like minorities to have things at all. So we want to use this as a stupid excuse to get rid of it. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, OSERS, should prepare a digest of best research on the subject and share it directly with the state superintendents and state special education leaders across the country who have been led by this regulation to believe a false problem diagnosis. Tell me you don't understand statistics without telling me you don't understand statistics. Or tell me you assume that who's ever reading this document and proposing this document doesn't understand statistics. Every effort should be made to dissuade states from continuing to operate on the assumption that overrepresentation requires state intervention after the federal pressure is rescinded. Oh, so now you want to pressure states to do things based on your research and information, but before you said that they shouldn't be doing that. Provide school meals to children in need. Do not use federal meals to support radical ideology. In May 2022, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, tried to advance that this isn't about education. Why is this here again? This is the second time we're talking about this. Tried to advance a radical political agenda using the federal school meal program. Nearly a century ago, federal lawmakers adopted a National School Lunch Program, NSLP, and School Breakfast Program, SBP, and other services to provide meals for K-12 students to give children from low-income families access to food while at school. Since the 1940s, federal lawmakers have greatly expanded these meal programs, creating an entitlement for nearly all students, regardless of family income levels, and have turned the meal programs into some of the most wasteful federal programs in Washington. Now the USDA is threatening to withhold federal taxpayer spending for these meals from schools that do not implement Title IX of the Educational Amendment of 1972 so that the term sex is replaced with sexual orientation and gender identity, or SOGI. The next administration should prohibit the USDA. Yeah, if you're outside of federal law, you don't get access to federal funding. Duh. The next administration should prohibit the USDA or other federal agencies from withholding services from federal or state agencies, including but not limited K-12 schools that choose not to replace sex with OSGI, that agency's administration of Title IX. You just said that the federal government should pressure states to bend to what they want in the education system. Now they're doing that, and you're saying that they're wrong for doing so. You're saying that that schools should receive money for discriminating and punishing children. The next administration will have significant support for this policy change among state officials and members of Congress. 22 state attorneys generals filed a lawsuit after the USDA's announcement that the agency intended to withhold spending from schools that do not replace sex with SOGI. Members of Congress also introduced legislation in 2022 that would prohibit agencies from carrying out its intentions regarding Title IX. Phase out existing income-driven payment plans. While income-driven repayment (IDR) of student loans is a superior approach relative to fixed payment plans, the number of IDR plans has proliferated beyond reason, and take a drink. Recent IDR plans are so generous that they require no or only token repayments for many students. The Secretary should phase out all existing IDR plans by making new loans, including consolidation loans, ineligible, and should implement a new IDR plan. The new plan should have an income exemption equal to the poverty line and require payments of 10% of income above the exemption. If new legislation is possible, there should be no loan forgiveness, but if not, existing law would require forgiving any remaining balance after 25 years. President Biden had proposed a new income-driven repayment program that could be extremely generous to borrowers, requiring only nominal payments from most students. Yeah, and ideally most students shouldn't be below the poverty line after they're done school, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal unless you're intending on keeping everybody in poverty, which it seems that very much seems to be your goal. Oh no, some middle-class kids might drink a carton of milk and have a sloppy Joe. The horror. I know, right? It would turn every policy lever to the most generous setting on record, e.g., lowering the percentage of income owed from 10% to 25% under the existing plan 5%, lowering the number of years of payment required from 20 or 25 years to 10 years, and increasing the income exemption from 150 to 225% of the poverty line. Again, I stand by. The majority of students that we're talking about have already paid back the principal, and owe more money than the principal was initially. That's the problem. They shouldn't owe money on a debt that they've already paid off. That's fucking insane. And very non-Christian, by the way. But why would we feed brown kids? Project 2025 translated. I know, right? The median borrower who earns an associate degree would owe only $25 a month, regardless of how much he or she had borrowed. Okay, yeah, what's the problem? The median bachelor's degree borrower would owe only $68 a month. This plan essentially converts these student loans into delayed grant programs. And Pepperidge Farm remembers when Trump tried the IOR, the poverty, to lower the poverty rate by lowering the poverty threshold, not actually helping anyone who's struggling and actually getting out of poverty. I know, right? It's like when he changed the chart and where the hurricane was going. But why male models? Other structural reforms that the Department of Education requires. Reform the federal education data collection, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP, and all other data collection currently released data by race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English language proficiency, disability, and sex. Hold on. Which sex are you using? Are you using the very strict inaccurate delineation that you've proposed, or are you using sex to mean gender identity? I just need some clarification, and I need you to take this gendered language out of this fucking document. It offends me. However, one of the most important, if not the most important factor influencing student educational achievement and attaining its attainment is family structure. As education scholar Ian Rowe has noted, NAEP already collects data on students' family structure. It just does not make those data publicly available. Sure, my unfinished journey for 666 said, Hail Nero and Chesh, down with racists. Yes, down with racists. All of these, I stand by my statement that I made like a couple of videos ago while we were reading this. The people who provided this document, the people who are engaged in making this, editing this, authoring this, and promoting this, need to be jailed for treason. This is a direct attack on democracy, on the American government, and a blatant assault on the American people. The Department of Education, or whichever agency collects such data long term, because we don't know, should make student data available by family structure to the public, including as part of its Data Explorer tool. Why? Why do you care? As discussed above, data collection efforts should be consolidated under the Census Bureau. Data collection efforts in higher education should also be improved by housing higher education data at the Department of Labor. Why are you trying to split this between 3 places? This would provide more transparency in evaluating post-secondary education and workforce training program outcomes, contextualize those results based on on trends observed more generally, enable the adjusting of real wage to account for regional differences in earnings and cost of living. So, like, you want to know if my parents are rich to know how much money I'm making? So you can implement more racist shit? And more things that target low-income families? And the working man? Apparently their idea of reducing poverty is letting poor kids starve. I know, right? And develop a reliable methodology for risk-adjusting institutional and program outcomes to more accurately reflect the value added of education programs as opposed to their admissions selectively. Currently, the Department of Education relies on graduate rates and average earnings as proxies for educational quality. Both of those outcomes, however, are highly dependent upon a student's socioeconomic background, sex, family status, and other factors. College and universities with selective administration policies post the strongest outcomes, primarily because they admit mostly low-risk traditional students. Open enrollment institutions post the weakest outcomes, largely because life is challenging and complicated for low-income and non-traditional students. What's a non-traditional student? Who may be forced to drop out when a work schedule changes. A child needs more attention, or an unexpected repair or medical bill makes continuing impossible. Oh, are these children or are these post-secondary adults? Such confounding factors make it difficult to isolate the impact of educational quality versus socioeconomic factors on student outcomes. Yeah, but part of that has to do with the district being the thing that pays for the education, right? So if you're in a poverty-stricken area, there is less money going into your educational district. The Department of Health and Human Services face similar challenges in trying to reevaluate healthcare outcomes since social detriments of health result in worse health outcomes among those who are socioeconomic disadvantaged. Yeah, because they're not getting health care. What are you talking about? Non-traditional student is a student who goes to college after their late teens and early 20s. Have low educational attainment levels, have struggled with addiction, or have poor diet and exercise habits. You mean they're not privileged? Without risk adjustment of outcomes, hospitals treating wealthy patients will always appear to be delivering good care. Higher education outcomes data should be similarly risk adjusted to more carefully isolate the impact of education quality versus socioeconomic status and other factors on college outcomes. Reform the negotiated rulemaking process at ED. The U.S. Department of Education is required by statute to engage in negotiated rulemaking prior to promulgating new regulations under Subchapter 1 of Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as well as Subchapters 2, Teacher Equality Enhancements, and 4 of the Higher Education Act of 1964, Student Assistance. The purpose of negotiated rulemaking is to engage a committee of stakeholders early in the drafting of proposed regulations to ensure that the regulation can be implemented and written to understand any potential unintended consequences and to seek suggestion from stakeholders on alternative solutions. The goal is for the negotiators to reach a consensus, thus smoothing the way to promulgate a new rule. Although it is helpful for the department to receive stakeholder input, the negotiated rulemaking process has become an expensive and time-consuming undertaking. Consensus is only rarely reached, enabling the department to pursue its own path. The department's master calendar, which requires final rules to be published by October 1st if they are to be implemented by July 1st of the subsequent year, components of the problem making it unduly challenging to update regulations as needed to keep pace with changes in education, finance, accounting, pedagogy, and student assessment. What is pedagogy? I think I know what that word is, but I want to double check to make sure that I'm not wrong. Pedagogy. Commonly understood as the approach to teaching is the theory and practice of learning and how this process is influenced by the social, political, and psychological development of the learners. The art, science, or profession of teaching. This is literally ChatGPT just throwing this word in here. It actually doesn't make any sense to be here. In recent decades, negotiated rulemaking has become a veritable three-ring circus, replete with negotiators who use their Twitter accounts and other social media feeds during negotiations to denigrate the process and their peer negotiators in real time. A few members of Congress use the public comment process to deliver political speeches, apparently to raise
their own profiles, but without adding any new information to the process. Some advocacy groups have latched onto the process for funding purposes, sometimes misrepresenting negotiation language to agitate followers and supporters to encourage them to make financial contributions. At times, the department itself has appeared to sabotage consensus, which enables them to write the regulation as they wish and without regard to the concerns raised by the negotiators. How? How does it do that? That would disable it, not enable it. The Department of Education should work with Congress to amend the HEA to eliminate the negotiated rule requirement. At minimum, Congress should allow the department to use public hearings rather than negotiated rulemaking sessions. Reform the Office of Federal Student Aid. The proposal urges the new administration to end the abuse of FSA's loans for forgiveness programs, to manage the federal student loan portfolio in a professional way, and work with Congress for a long-term overhaul of the program for the benefits of the students and taxpayers. The new administration must end the prior administration's abuse of the agency's payment pause and HEA loan forgiveness programs, including borrower defense to repayment, closed to school discharge, and public service loans forgiveness. The new administration should also take immediate steps to commence the rulemaking process to rescind or substantially modify the prior administration's HEA regulations. The federal government does not have the prior incentives to make sound lending decisions, so the administration should consider returning to a system in which private lenders backed by government grantees would compete to offer student loans, including subsidized and unsubsidized loans. What? This would allow for market prices and signals to influence educational borrowing, introducing consumer-driven accountability to higher education. Pell Grants should retain their current voucher-like structure. How are you going to do that when you have one of the highest fucking inflation rates on the planet? You can't do that. Oh my god. I can see maybe an argument for this if the inflation rate was incredibly low and the current American middle class and lower class was actually doing really well and their dollar was very powerful. But doing this at the height of an inflation crisis is fucking insane. This is literally, like I said, this is going to kill people. This is terrorism. If Congress is unwilling to reform federal student aid, then the next administration should consider the following reforms. Switch to a fair value accounting from FCRA accounting and consolidate all federal loan programs into one program that 1. Utilizes income-driven repayment, 2. Includes no interest rate subsidies or loan forgiveness, 3. Includes annual and aggregate limits on borrowing, and 4. Requires skin in the game from colleagues to help hold them accountable for loan repayment. So, circumvent Congress. The Biden administration has mercilessly pillaged the student loan portfolio for crass political purposes. Oh, you mean to help students? Without regard for the need of current taxpayers or future students, this must never happen again. As detailed in Section 3, the next administration should work with Congress to spin off federal student aid into a new government corporation with professional governance and management. Professionals again. New policy priorities for 2025 and beyond. New legislation that should be prioritized. For nearly 250 years, Congress has incorporated public and private institutions, including banks, the District of Columbia's cities, government, and other organizations that federal officials deem to be conducting operations in the public interest. Such charters offer a certain status to organizations often viewed as a seal of approval, according to the Congressional Research Service report, which can help these organizations in their fundraising and other advocacy efforts. When the nation's largest teacher association, the National Education Association, the NEA, cites its federal charter, it lends the NEA a level of significance and suggests an effectiveness that is not only supported by evidence. In fact, the NEA and other nation's other large teacher union, the American Federation of Teachers, or the AFT, use litigation and other efforts to block school choice and advocate for additional taxpayer spending in education. Insert union busting here. They also lobbied to keep schools closed during the pandemic. All of these positions run contrary to a robust research evidence showing a positive outcome for students from educational choice policies. What are you talking about? There is no conclusive evidence that more taxpayer spending on schools improves student outcomes. Yeah, there is definitive evidence that a student who is not hungry pays better attention in class. That would be more spending in education causing better outcomes. So that's just a fucking lie. That is just a lie. My Infinite Shock for Chew said, use all your socks to lick and share. Oh, wait. Don't forget to lick the stream. Lick that subscribe button. And evidence finds that keeping schools closed to in-person learning resulted in negative emotional and academic outcome for students in an emergency situation. Fuck you. You just spent a whole bunch of time talking about the context of someone's home life and socioeconomic status, but you're going to disregard the pandemic? Furthermore, the union promotes radical racial and gender ideologies in school that parents oppose, according to national representative surveys. Oh, so whatever. You know what? Never mind. Fuck you. I don't care. You're stupid. Congress should rescind the National Education Association congressional. That completely undermines what they were saying earlier about how schools are being forced to use this gender ideology language and they should be forced to not use it. And saying that, oh, they're gonna withhold money from schools that aren't using this SOGI terminology. And now they're saying that, oh, but all the teachers in the union are pro using that. So then they're not holding back any money at all, you fucking numpties. Fuck you. Fuck this document. Congress should rescind the National Education Association's congressional. I just spit everywhere. Charter. I'm foaming at the mouth. And remove the false impression that federal taxpayers support the political activities of the special interest group. This move, I don't know, do students and children wanting education count as a special interest group? Or you just don't like that they're gay? This move would not be unprecedented as Congress has rescinded the federal charters for other organizations over the past century. The NEA is demonstrably radical special interest group that overwhelmingly supports left or center politics and policymakers. Members should conduct hearings to determine how much federal taxpayer money the NEA has used for radical causes favoring a single political party. Parental rights in education and safeguarding students. You know what? How do we feel about just removing parental rights in education in totality? How would we feel about that? It's just a question. I'm not saying we should or it would be a good idea. I just want to know. I want a bead. I want to get a pulse on how people think, what people think about that. Federal officials should protect educators and students in jurisdictions under federal control from radical discrimination by reinforcing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and prohibiting compelled speech. Specifically, no teacher or students in Washington, D.C. Public School, Bureau of Indian Education Schools, or Department of Defense schools should be compelled to believe, profess, or adhere to any idea, but especially ideas that violate state and federal civil rights laws. By its very design, critical race theory has applied dimension. As its founders state in their essays that define the theory, those who subscribe to the theory believe that racism, in this case treating individuals differently based on race, is appropriate, necessary even, making the theory more than merely an analytical tool to describe race in public and private life. I recommend going and looking at the video that Monty and I did about critical race theory to talk about why this is so fucking stupid. So I'm just going to go through this really fast. I'm not going to comment on it and just watch the video. Just understand that this is stupid ass bullshit, incorrect, and really requires some citations. This is just a misrepresentation, a misunderstanding, and a misapplication as a buzzword to fearmonger to racist white people. That's all this is. So I'm just going to read and burn through this really fucking fast, all right? The theory disrupts Americans' foundational ideas of freedom and opportunity. So when critical race theory is used as part of school activities, such as mandatory affinity groups, teacher training programs, and with educators, in which educators are required to profess the privilege or school assignments in which the students must defend the false idea that America is systematically racist. You are literally describing in this thing how it is systematically racist and you wanting to make it more systematically racist. The theory is actively disrupting the values and that hold communities together with such equality under the law and colorblindness. As such, lawmakers should design legislation that prevents the theory from spreading discrimination. For K-12 systems under the jurisdiction of federal lawmakers should adopt proposals that say no individual should receive punishment or benefits based on the color of their skin. Furthermore, school officials should not require students or teachers to believe that individuals are guilty or responsible for the actions of others based on race or ethnicity. Educators should not be forced to... Okay, so here's the thing with that, right? Ideally, great. But when you use colorblindness as an excuse to do racist things to people, you're not actually being colorblind. It's just a smokescreen. On the other hand, ideally, yes, nobody should be getting benefits and nobody should be getting punishments or detriments due to the color of their skin. But to get there, you have to get everybody on the same playing field. And until everybody is on the same playing field, you need to help them get there. Once they are there, then you can look at making those changes. And currently, America is not at that point. So until America is at that point, you need to fuck off with this. Educators should not be forced to discuss contemporary political issues. But what? Why? You don't want students to know about the current political climate? That's fucking stupid. But neither should they refrain from discussing certain subjects in an attempt to protect students from ideas with which they disagree. Proposals such as this should result in robust classroom discussions, not censorship. At the state level, states should require schools to post classroom materials online to provide maximum transparency to parents. Yeah, and who's going to do that? Who are you going to pay to do that? Again, specifically for K-12 systems under federal authority, Congress and the next administration should support existing state and federal civil rights laws and add to such laws a prohibition on compelled speech. So how would they feel about compelled speech, about not saying the N-word? Is that compelled speech? Because it sounds like the same argument to me. Advancing legal protections for parental rights in education. While the U.S. Supreme Court and other federal courts have consistently reorganized that parents have the right and duty to direct the care and upbringing of their children, they have not always treated parental rights as co-equal to other fundamental rights. Correct, because the student would have, or the child would have, those rights inalienable regardless, like free speech or the free exercise of religion. As a result, some courts treat parental rights as a second-tier right and do not properly safeguard these rights against government infringement. The courts vary greatly over which species ChatGPT rears its ugly head yet again. Which species of constitutional review, rational basis, intermediate scrutiny, and strict scrutiny apply to parental rights cases. This uncertainty has emboldened federal agencies to promote rules and policies that infringe parental rights. For example, under the Biden administration's proposed Title IX regulations, schools could be required to assist a child with a social or medical gender transition without parental consent or withhold information from parents about a child's social transition. There is no medical gender transitions happening to children. You're fucking dumb. E.g. changing their names or pronouns. Yeah, okay, why does that matter? If a kid wants to be called a dinosaur in primary school, why do you give a shit? The federal government could demand that schools include curriculum or lessons regarding critical race theory or gender theory in a way that violates parental rights. No, it doesn't. Especially if it requires minors to disclose information about their religious beliefs or beliefs about race or gender in violation of Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment 20 U.S.C. Section 1232H. To remedy this lack of clear or robust protection for parental rights, the next administration should... They're basically saying that trans kids and gay kids have less rights than their parents do to oppress them. That's what they're saying. work to pass a federal Parents' Bill of Rights that restores parental rights to a top-tier right. So you want parental rights and what a parent wants to do to their child, regardless of the child's consent, to supersede that child's rights as an individual. Do you realize that in doing so, you could enforce that would enable a parent to force a child to transition? That would make that applicable. Not that that would happen, but what I'm saying is if you circumcede the child's rights, it would enable, like, based on what a parent wants to happen to that child, it enables a parent to enforce a gender ideology onto a child, right? Without their consent. So a child that was born a woman, or born female, that identifies as a female, could be forced to identify as a boy by their parent. In the rules that you're proposing. All those dads out there who are disappointed that they have girls because they wanted a male child. That's not problematic. So you want to enforce gender ideology, you just want it to be your gender ideology, which has this arbitrary line drawn to it that connects gender identity to biological sex, which is not necessarily inherently connected. You mean what happened to David Reimer? What? Something like that? So, Chesh, how's the aneurysm going? Such legislation would give families a fair hearing in court where the federal government enforces any policy against a parent in a way that undermines their rights and responsibility to raise, educate, and care for their children. The law would require the government to satisfy strict scrutiny, the highest standard of judicial review, when the government infringes parental rights. Further ensure that any regulations that could impact parental rights contain similar protections and require federal agencies to demonstrate that their actions meet strict scrutiny before final rule is promulgated. How much longer do I have of this? At the same time, Congress should also consider... Can somebody look ahead on this document and see how many pages I have left? Because I want to be done. We're past the 2-hour mark. At the same time, Congress should also consider equipping parents with a private right of action. 2 federal laws provide certain privacy protections for students attending educational institutions or programs funded by the department. The Family of Education Rights and Privacy Act, or the FERPA, protects the privacy of a student education records, allows parents and students over the age of 18 to inspect and review the student's education records maintained by the school and request correction to those records. FERPA also authorizes a number of exceptions to this record privacy protections that allow schools to disclose the student's education records without consent or knowledge of the parent or student. The protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, or PPRA, requires schools to obtain parental consent before asking questions, including surveys about political affiliations or beliefs, mental or psychological issues, sexual behaviors or attitudes, critical appraisals of family members, illegal or self-incriminating behavior, religious practices or beliefs, privileged relationships, as with doctors and clergy, and family income, unless for program eligibility. The difficulty for parents is that FERPA and PPRA do not authorize a private right of action. If the school refuses to comply with either statute, the only remedy for the parent or the student, if over the age of 18, is to file an administrative complaint to the U.S. Department of Education, which must then work with the school to obtain compliance before taking any action to suspend or terminate federal financial assistance. Investigations can take months, if not years. The department has never suspended or terminated the funding for an educational institution or agency for violating FERPA or PPRA. Is that because there aren't very many violations, or is this because it is an administrator making a mistake, or an administrator gets fired as opposed to removing funding from the entire district or the entire school? Because that sounds like bullshit to me. In essence, Congress has granted parents and students important statutory rights without an effective remedy to assert those rights. I don't know if I agree with that, but okay. 17 more pages. The next administration should work with Congress to amend FERPA and PPRA to provide parents and students over the age of 18 years with a private right of action to seek injunctive and declaratory relief, together with attorneys' fees and costs, if the prevailing party against educational institutions and agencies that violate rights enshrined in these statutes. This will empower students and empower parents and students, level the playing field between families and education bureaucracies, and encourage institutional compliance with these statutory requirements. Protect parental rights and policy. In addition to strengthening legal protections for parents, the next administration should prioritize legislation advancements such as rights. Promising ideas have appeared in bills introduced in the 117th Congress, such as H.R. 8767, the Empowering Parents Act, sponsored by Representative Bob Good, a Republican VA, which is Virginia? No. Which one's VA? H.R. 6056, the Parents' Bill of Rights Act, sponsored by Representative Julia Letlow, which is Republican LA, and H.J. Res 99, proposing an amendment to the Constitution relating to the parental rights, sponsored by Representative Debbie Leskow in Republican AZ, which I believe is Arizona. Oh, wait, it was Virginia. Okay. These congressional actions should be carefully reviewed to make sure that they complement the state parents' Bill of Rights, such as those posed in Georgia 2022, Florida 2021, Montana 2021, Wyoming 2017, Idaho 2015, Oklahoma 2014, Virginia 2013, and Arizona 2010. Hey, if you want to improve all this stuff, why don't you look at which state has the best education and then copy it at all of the other states at minimum? How about start with that, and that would get everybody at the same level. That's the Rick Perry strategy, yeah. As documented by writers such as Abigail Shearer and other American Society of Plastic Surgeons, documented a 4-fold increase in the number of biological girls seeking gender surgery between 2016 and 2017. Larger increases were found in the UK from 2009 to 2019. Oh, okay, but how old were they? All you're saying is biological girls. Were they girls? Were they women? What was their age? In 2017 and 2019. Also, yeah, there was a really big increase in breast reduction surgery when it was made available for younger people, because there are a lot of kids that get treated like shit in school because they develop, like girls, because they develop breasts earlier in life and their breasts get large and cause them back problems later in life, so they were doing the surgery preventatively earlier. I hate you. These statistics and others point to the social contagion in which minor children, especially girls, are attempting to make life-altering decisions using puberty blockers. That's plastic surgery, not puberty blockers. Way to fucking jump the shark. And other hormone treatments and even surgeries to remove or alter vital body parts. Vital body parts. Double G tits. Vital body parts. Why look at the states? The reason you would, like, America would look at its own states is because only America exists and nowhere else exists. And the states are supposed to be in charge of their own education systems. So if you want the states to be in charge of their own education systems, you use the numbers from the states that are doing the best at it and then apply whatever those things are to the other states. That's why. Oh yeah, surgery to correct gyno in young guys is included in those stats. Of course it is. Of course it is. Heritage Foundation research, take a drink, finds that providing easier access to such treatments and surgeries without parental involvement does not reduce the suicidality of these young people and may even increase such suicide rates. Citation needed. You did not cite anything for that, which is very funny. You're citing yourself at best, and you didn't even do that properly. The next administration should take particular note of how radical gender ideology is having devastating effect on school-aged children today, especially young girls. School officials in some states are requiring teachers and other school employees to accept minor children's decision to assume a different gender while at school without notifying parents. In California, New Jersey, and certain districts in Kansas and elsewhere, educators are prohibited from informing parents about a child's confusion over their sex if children do not want their parents to know. Such policies allow schools to drive a wedge between parents and children. No, that's just helping children avoid abuse, but sure. The next administration should work with Congress to provide an example to state lawmakers by requiring K-12 districts under federal jurisdiction, including Washington, D.C. Public Schools, Bureau of Indian Education Schools, and Department of Defense schools with legislation stating that, bullet point, sorry, no public education employee or controller shall use a name to address a student other than the name listed on the student's birth certificate without written permission from a student's parents or guardians. No public education employee. Oh my god, so no nicknames? You can't even use nicknames at this point now? This is so fucking goddamn dumb. No public education employee or controller shall use a pronoun in addressing a student that is different from that student's biological sex without written permission of a student's parents or guardians. Okay, I have a really easy solution to this. All birth certificates should just be listed as they, them, non-binary, to be updated at that person's discretion at a later date. There you go. Problem solved. You're welcome. No public institutions may require an education employee or contractor to use pronouns that does not match with a person's biological sex if contrary to the employee or contractor's religious or moral convictions. State lawmakers should use okay, but what if a student changes religions? State lawmakers should use this model to adopt similar provisions for public schools within their borders. Federal lawmakers should not allow public school employees to keep secrets about their children from their child's parents. Advanced school choice policies. The DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, a voucher program providing school scholarship to students from low-income families living in the nation's capital to attend private school of choice, is capped at $20 million annually and limited to students at or below 185% of the federal poverty line. This maximum school scholarship amount is $9,401 for a student in kindergarten through 8th grade and $14,102 for students in grades 9 through 12. The average scholarship amount is around $10,000, or less than half of the current per student funding amount in the DC public schools. Congress should expand eligibility to all students regardless of income and background. Didn't you just... What? I'm sorry? Did you not spend a whole shitload of time saying that only low-income family students should be allowed to eat, and now you're saying regardless of socioeconomic status, people should be enabled to get a scholarship? Are you fucking kidding me? Congress should expand eligibility to all students regardless of income or background and raise the student scholarship amount to funding students receive in DC public school. Spending per student in 2022 was $22,856. All families should be able to take their children's taxpayer-funded education dollars to the education providers of their choosing, whether it be a public school or a private school. Why? Why should taxpayers pay for private school? Congress should additionally deregulate the program. Why should low-income families who are paying taxes pay for upper crust families, kids, to go to expensive private schools? Tell me that. Why? Congress should additionally deregulate the program by removing the requirements of private schools to administer the DC public school assessment and allow private schools to control their administration's process. Provide education choices for populations under the jurisdiction of Congress. The federal government oversees 3 school systems that Washington should transform into examples of quality learning environments for every child in those systems. Students attending schools in Washington, D.C., students in active duty military families, including students attending schools operated by the U.S. Department of Defense, and students attending schools on tribal lands, which includes students under the Bureau of Indian Education. In each of these systems, federal lawmakers should allow every student the option of using education savings accounts so that parents can select different education products and services to meet their child's needs. After 50,000 students attend public school, regardless of what the student wants. Nearly 50,000 students attend public schools in the District of Columbia in 2021 to 2022 school year. In 2022, so you want to use military students and military families as lab rats for education. Okay. In 2022, fourth grade math students scored 11 points lower than fourth grade graders in 2019. I can't imagine why. Which means district children lost an entire year of learning over the course of the pandemic. Eighth graders also lost an entire year of learning in math. Federal lawmakers should offer district students the opportunity to use education savings accounts. They could have just put school on hold for a year and then just had everybody be a year older and it would have been fine. Like, they've just been like, you know what? Everybody's just retaking the year and we're just not doing school for a year. Like, why didn't we just do that? I don't know. Federal lawmakers should offer district students the opportunity to use education savings account. A portion of a child's federal education spending should be deposited in a private spending account that parents can use to pay for personal tutors, education therapists, and books and curricular materials, private school tuition, transportation, and more. Accounts modeled after the account in Arizona, Florida, West Virginia, and 7 other states. I would not use Florida as an example for anything regarding education. Pick somewhere else. Pick somewhere better. Now they want to employ policy on a temporary pandemic. Yeah, a pandemic that's already over? Yes. Members of Congress should design the same account system for students in a pandemic that was fake. Members of Congress should design the same account system for students in active duty military families, including students attending schools that receive funding under the National Defense Authorization Act or the NDAA. Heritage Foundation research, take a drink, found that even 10% of the students eligible for accounts under such proposal transferred from an assigned school to an education savings account. The change for the sending district would be 0.1% of that school's district's K-12 budget. Even in heavily impacted districts with a large number of students receiving impact aid, the budgetary effect would be less than 2%. Yeah, but what's that number? The percent is meaningless if we don't know the number. Yet these children would then have the chance to receive a customized education that meets their unique needs. As with state ESA program, families who are homeschooling are distinct in statutes from families who use an ESA to customize an education at home. Furthermore, research into the Claremont Institution used documents provided by whistleblowers demonstrating the educators in the Department of Defense schools around the world are using radical gender theory and critical race theory in their lessons. Radical gender theory. This instructional material discards biology in favor of political indoctrination and applies critical race theory's core tenets, advocating for more radical discrimination. More radical than you guys just discriminate, like segregating people? This instructional material, such ideas are highly unpopular among parents. Which parents? According to nationally representative surveys, and the course material attempts to indoctrinate students with radical ideas about race and ambiguous concepts of gender. It's almost like teaching biology is one set of education, or like one class, and teaching social norms and society and studying that is a different class entirely. Weird. I wonder why social economics or social studies is not a biology class. Why isn't social studies taught in biology, guys? Can you tell me that? Can you answer me that one? Champ? No? Unique needs often means kids working in their parents' businesses all day or overly religious curriculum. Finally, schools on tribal lands and under the auspice of the Bureau of Indian Education, or the BIE, are among the worst performing schools in the country. Research from Representative Burgess Owens, and you want to burn it more. Oh, okay. Office reports that the graduation rate for BIE students is 53%, lower than the average of the Native American students in public schools around the country, and nearly 30% points lower than the national average for all students. In 2015, Arizona lawmakers expanded the state's education savings account program to include children living on tribal lands, and by 2021, nearly 400 Native American students were using the accounts. Did it improve the graduation rate? Because that would be direct evidence that you said didn't exist, by the way. I have an intense hatred whenever these oil drilling fucks talk about biology. They think androgynous, non-binary, and intersex people will just disappear if nobody gets taught about it. Like, what? Yeah, it's almost like people weren't taught about it for a long time and those people still fucking existed. This is very stupid. This is literally, we're going to close our eyes and cover our ears and pretend the data doesn't exist by not collecting it, and in doing so, those people won't exist anymore. Federal officials should design a federal education savings account option for all children attending BIE schools. The next administration should make the K-12 system under federal jurisdiction examples of learning opportunities and education freedom. Washington should convert some of the lowest performing public school systems in the country into areas defined by choices, creating rigorous learning options ChatGPT, you're back. For all children from all backgrounds, income levels, and ethnicities. But not if they want to eat. Expand education choices through portability and existing federal funds. Oh, trains and buses? That'd be great. Education settings, policies on the right track long term would require sunsetting the U.S. Department of... You know what? We're 2 hours and 30 minutes in. I'm done. I'm getting out of here. I'm leaving. We're done here. Goodbye. I'll be back. We're almost halfway through this document. We're at page 381 of 920. All right, we're taking a break. I'm going away. I'm leaving. My throat hurts. I'm going to go do art over on Twitch in a little bit, and then I'm going to play more Supermarket Simulator where I'm making the best supermarket ever. I'm leaving. We're on page 381. I'll be back tomorrow. Goodbye. Fuck this document. Fuck you. I hate this thing. Fuck this. This is stupid. Fuck this shit.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. God have mercy on your soul.